Today I'm going to be revisiting all of my 5-star reads throughout the years according to Goodreads and see which ones I still stand by. Do they hold up? Would I still call them 5 stars today? Or are there some that are now questionable? I got this idea from one of my channel members, Lorena, so thank you so much, Lorena, for suggesting this idea. In case you do not know, I do have a channel membership here through YouTube, and if you join, you can get access to my private members Discord where I accept video requests, and this is exactly where that came from. I was in the mood to do something a little more casual and chatty today, and I love Lorena's idea of just revisiting all of my 5-star reads. She said she was going through my Goodreads and got this idea for me to talk about which ones I still stand by and which ones I maybe wouldn't, and I have a feeling I know why she said that, because I'm sure there's some crazy stuff on my Goodreads that I have as 5 stars that I read when I was like 15 years old, because I've been on Goodreads forever, and I am excited but also nervous to dive into that with you today. Okay, so we are in my Goodreads. I have read 639 books that I've logged in Goodreads. Like I said, I've been on here a very long time, and right now it is just ranked by average rating of highest to lowest, but we are going to sort it to highest rating to see all of my 5 stars. I want to count how many 5 stars I have, but I don't want to spoil the book, so I'm going to cover the book covers on my screen so I can count how many 5 stars I have to start. I have 123 5 stars. That is way more than I expected there to be. It's very possible that I'm off by like a tiny little bit. If you count all these up at the end, it could be, you know, plus or minus 1 or 2, because it was kind of hard to count that. But 123 out of 639 books is 19%, which means almost 1 in every 5 books I've ever read has been a 5-star for me, which is wild. My Goodreads is not perfectly accurate to every book I've ever read. Sometimes I forget books. There would be periods of like 6 months to a year where I wasn't really updating Goodreads very much if I wasn't reading as much. So I've definitely read like a little bit more than 639 books in my life. But wow, that is more than I was expecting. So I'm not gonna be able to stop and talk about every single book because that would take forever. But we'll go through quickly, and then at the end I'll pull together some views too of which ones I stand by, which ones I definitely don't stand by, and which ones are kind of like in the middle of I would probably have to revisit the book to know if I stand by it or not. So first up, we're gonna have a lot of books in here that were school reads. I just know that is what's going to be in here. Why did I rate these 5 stars? I don't know. I feel like when I read a book critically, I do tend to enjoy it more. I've been finding that with my book club recently, that when I'm reading books for my book club, I'm reading them so much more intentionally and I'm appreciating them more, and that usually makes me enjoy them more. So I think there will be a trend of seeing books that I read for school in these 5 stars as well. First off, A Separate Piece by John Knowles. I don't remember much about that book other than the fact that there are 2 boys. I really don't remember much about it. Can't even remember what I read it for. I think it was in college, and I really cannot say that I stand by it because I cannot even remember what the book is about. 1984 is a classic and it is a good story, but I'm probably gonna have to put it in the maybe bucket for me because I don't know if I would absolutely stand by this, and if I read it today, if it would be like just an enjoyable book in my day-to-day, but it was an enjoyable one to have to read for school. I liked reading it and discussing it, and that's not always the case with school books. Then we have Ligeia, which is a short story by Edgar Allan Poe, which I don't remember. So that is going to have to go in the I don't stand by it bucket. That's how I'm gonna have to think about that one. The Shining, I read that one in 2020 and I loved it, and I still to this day feel confident that I loved it. Love the atmosphere. It's been my favorite King that I've read so far, so that one I do stand by. And also the book is way better than the movie. A Wrinkle in Time, this one I reread in 2017. I was taking a college course that was all about young adult literature and how to teach young adult literature to teens. I was not on track to become a teacher, but I was an English major, and it was just a cool class that I got to take for some credit. And I really enjoyed reading A Wrinkle in Time then. I really enjoyed A Wrinkle in Time the first time I ever read it as a child. I enjoyed the movie adaptation that they made of it. And so while I cannot remember every single detail of this book, I feel like I've got to stand by it because I've visited that text twice and then saw a movie adaptation and still really liked it all that time. So I feel like I would stand by that one. The Handmaid's Tale, it's been a while since I've read it. Last read it in the beginning of 2018. I think I read that one for school as well, maybe. And it's obviously a great book, but I don't personally really remember it. The TV show is great, but I feel like I'm gonna have to put this in the maybe. I don't know if I would stand by the text unless I revisited it. Same thing for I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. I did not actually read this in 2017. I just logged it in 2017. I think I read this in elementary school. Like, I'm pretty sure I did a project on this book in 5th grade, and yeah, I was 10 years old at the time. So I definitely do not remember that now, but I'm sure it's great. It just is something I would have to reread again, so that goes in the maybe bucket. The school books continue. Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, and I'm gonna skip over a couple with Uncle's Tom Cabin as well. I read both of those in the same class in college, and I do not really remember anything about them. Those are gonna have to go in the maybe bucket. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, which is the 3rd book in the series. That's as far as I've ever gotten in the Harry Potter series. I was not a fan of them as a child. I just was not introduced to the books or the movies, not for any reasons. It was not withheld from me. I was just never genuinely interested in them. And then when I was in college, I tried to read them, and I read the first 3 and I thought they were fine, but I didn't keep reading them. 3rd one I remember being my favorite, Prisoner of Azkaban, because I liked what it did with time travel stuff. But given everything that's happened around this series, well, not the series, I mean also kind of the series, but particularly the author, I just don't care about it. Like, I never cared about it, and I was reading them not even because I wanted to, and yeah, it was just like, I don't know, everyone was reading it, and so I felt this pressure to read them, and then they were never even something that I had that nostalgia for. And then with everything that's come out with J.K. Rowling, like these, I don't feel the need to ever talk about or look at or read or revisit, and I'm just gonna put this in the don't stand by it category because I do not support this author and all of the awful things that she spews on the internet. Then we have The Catcher in the Rye, which I read in college for school, and I did really enjoy this one, and I don't know if I would give it a 5-star today, honestly, if I was just reading it on my own and not in a class, because it's a little bit, I don't know, like the tone of it is a little bit not my favorite of what I typically enjoy, but I really enjoyed it when I read it. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I feel like I would have to put this in the maybe bucket, although in my mind I still remember the story and I still like the character and I liked analyzing that book. But if I was just giving a general recommendation to a friend, I cannot confidently say like, oh my gosh, you're gonna love The Catcher in the Rye, so that's gonna go in the middle category. And Then There Were None is also gonna go in the middle category. I can't really remember much about the book in particular other than the general plot and the twist that happens in it. And then I tried to read another Agatha Christie a year ago and I really did not enjoy it, so I don't know if I would still like this or if I just liked it when I first read it in 2015. To Kill a Mockingbird, another school book, another one that's going in the maybe category. This is definitely going to be our biggest category because a lot of them I just don't remember because I read these so long ago. Confessions, however, that one is going to go in the I definitely stand by it category. I read this one in 2022 and it was a favorite of last year, like one of my top 2 favorite books that I read last year. It is such a good psychological revenge suspense story. If you haven't read it yet and you like those genres, I highly recommend checking it out. It is so well done. We have more Harry Potters, which we're gonna just put in the don't stand by them category and move on. The Year of the Flood, which is the 2nd book in the Mad Adam trilogy by Margaret Atwood. I read this one for a course. I have not read the full trilogy. I didn't even read the 1st book. We just read the 2nd book for the class. It was a class about environmental literature and I loved it. I don't remember every single thing about it, but I would reread this for sure. I would go back and read the whole trilogy. I really enjoyed this and I feel like I would stand by it today. Then we have Dark Places by Gillian Flynn, which I can't remember. I read that in 2015. That is crazy. And so that one is gonna have to go in the maybe category. The Night Circus, I read that in 2020. I have an entire shelf dedicated to it on my bookshelf. I stand by that book. It's beautiful, it's magical. It just envelops you in this warm feeling and it's one of my favorite fantasy books. I haven't read many fantasy books, but this one is one of my favorites. Then we have Anya's Ghost, which is a graphic novel that I read in 2020 and I really thought this was great. I would stand by this as a really great graphic novel. Ready Player One, I read in 2016. I remember the story, but I don't know. I just can't imagine myself enjoying it today. In 2016 when I read it, I didn't read many books that year, I don't believe. I was just kind of reading what was popular. I probably read like 20 books in the year and I liked everything I was reading probably. And so now I don't feel like this one would be for me, but I'm still just gonna put it in the maybe category because I do remember the story and I remember enjoying it. I just don't know if 2023 actually would. The Fall of the House of Usher, don't remember. Gonna have to put that in the maybe category. When She Woke by Hilary Jordan, I never have seen anyone else talk about this book. I remember freaking loving this when I read it in 2015, but it could be the most problematic, worst written book in the whole world, and I would have no memory of it. I just know that in 2015, I was eating it up. I was like, oh my God, this is such a cool story. So I definitely am going to have to put that in the I don't know. I was gonna put it in the I don't stand for it anymore bucket, but I don't know, maybe it is still a good story. I just genuinely can't remember, so that one's going in the maybe bucket. Me Before You, there's been a lot of conversations about this one since it came out. I read it in 2016, and there's been a lot of conversations about the representation in it and the film as well. So I'd have to put this in the maybe bucket. I'd have to reevaluate it today with all of the knowledge I've gained since 2016 about just being more inclusive and what I think about it and what other people from those communities are saying about it. I genuinely don't know. This is gonna have to go in the maybe bucket. Cress, The Lunar Chronicles, #3 by Marissa Meyer. I think we're gonna see all of the books in that series in my 5 stars, and See, again, I was gonna say, I feel like I totally stand by it because I just know I love those books and had so much fun with them. But I feel like I've heard some things too about the representation in these books, and 2015 Ashley wouldn't have had all of that knowledge and those thoughts on those books. And so maybe I wouldn't stand by them if I revisited them, but I really did love them as a teen. But I feel like that's gonna have to go in the maybe bucket as well. And now here's where I'm about to be exposed, because we're about to see a lot of Colleen Hoover. Okay, I was reading these in 2015, keep that in mind. In 2015, I was, how old was I in 2015?
It's 2023, I'm 26. So 20, 23, 2, 1, 0, and then 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 years younger than 6. 18.
I think I was 18 in 2015. That was a lot of math to have to do. I was 18, okay? I wasn't in good relationships. I didn't know what a good relationship was. I didn't, you know, I liked these books then, okay? Would I now? Absolutely, probably not. So I will say, like, almost anything Colleen Hoover, I'm probably just gonna put it in the don't stand for a bucket because I remember these stories. They were ingrained on me, okay? I was so attached to them, and I just know, like, the writing, not good. The portrayal of relationships, not good. I don't have to revisit them. I'm certain of that. These live on in infamy in my 5 stars in Goodreads because 18-year-old Ashley ate that shit up. But this version of Ashley definitely does not. So I'm gonna put Slammed in the don't stand by it bucket, and Point of Retreat, and Hopeless, and Ugly Love, and any other Colleen Hoover books you see in here are probably also going to go in that category. All Our Yesterdays by Kristen Terrell. This is a really random book that I've also not really heard anyone talk about. Loved this shit in 2015. I don't think my adult self would, but I'm happy for my teen self that she got to have the joy in this book. And so that's one of those books that I'm never going to revisit. I'm not gonna reread it. I'm gonna just put it in the maybe bucket. I don't know. I had that experience once in my youth, and that's good enough for me. Lexicon by Max Berry, another book I remember loving. Read this back in 2015. I feel like a lot of these books in my 5 stars are going to be books that I read back in like 2015, 2016, 2017, because in those years everything I read was probably just like a 5 star, because if I only read 10 to 30 books in a year, I was just like, yeah, this is great, this is great, this is great, I love it. And now I read like 120 books in a year, and I'm much more picky because I'm going through things so much faster. So still, like, a lot of these are going in the maybe bucket. Lexicon's gonna go in the maybe bucket. The Rosie Project is gonna go in the maybe bucket. The Casey West books, I also had a Casey West phase, like On the Fence and The Fill-In Boyfriend. Those are gonna go in the maybe bucket. We've got some more Colleen Hoover we can put in the don't stand by it bucket with Finding Cinderella and November 9 and Confess. And then still some older ones that I read, Big Little Lies in 2016. Loved it then, don't know if I'd love it now. Don't ever plan on revisiting that. Really liked the show when it came out. Still just gonna put this in the maybe bucket. Like, I only wanna put things in the absolutely stand by it bucket that I would recommend to you today and be able to hold a conversation about with you and feel confident in that, so that you can look at that as like truly my all-time favorite books. So we're gonna keep rolling on that. The Girl on the Train, again, going in the maybe bucket. A Little Life, this one was much more recent. I read this in 2020, so we can actually talk about this. I think that book creates a world that you just get absolutely absorbed in. You get so invested in those characters. You get so connected with those characters. I do have a reading vlog still up on my channel that I did reading this book. Can't promise you what the quality of that vlog's gonna be. No memory of what I say about the book in that video because it's been so long, but you could check that out if you're interested. I suppose I should probably go back and check that out at some point and see if I still want to keep that on my channel. But there's also a lot of conversations with this book about it being torture porn. Is it or is it not? Is it too far? Is it realistic? What does it mean to say something's realistic or not when it's that level of trauma? There's a lot of nuanced conversations to have around this book. I still stand by, I think it was really well written because it really like pulls you into the characters. And I don't know if I'd call it like a favorite book of mine. I would never think to recommend this book to anyone, but when I think about books that I just got really pulled into the world of, this is one that comes to my mind. So I'm gonna say that I stand by this book still being a 5-star, but I don't mean that as like, look at this and then go read this book. I think, you know, proceed with caution with it because it really is a tricky one. Pretty Girls also kind of is. It's a pretty disturbing thriller. I stand by it being a 5-star thriller though. That is a thrilling book. It is also a disturbing book. So again, one to proceed with caution. Okay, maybe not, and it ends with us. We know where those are going. Those are Colleen Hoover books. We're putting those in the nope. Her Sweetest Downfall by Kelly Wallace. I read this in 2016. It's a historical romance, and this was the first time ever that an author reached out to me directly and asked me to read and review their book. And so I read it and I was like, oh yeah, it's good. And I gave it a 5-star because it was 2016. It was my first time ever doing that. And I was having a direct conversation with the author. So I was like, yeah, I have to give it a 5-star. There's absolutely no way that I would read and enjoy this book today. And that's okay. But we're gonna put it in the don't stand by it category and we're gonna move on. Every Heart a Doorway, absolutely stand by it. Go read this series. They're wonderful. They're amazing. They are fairy tales for adults. Everyone will love them. I feel confident in that. Read those books. They're so good. Another Lunar Chronicles book, again, gonna have to put this in the maybe category. Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris. Just recently read that one last year. I can stand by this one. It is a very entertaining book. It is a triggering book and it will make you mad, but it does what it sets out to do. Down Among the Sticks and Bones, another in the Wayward Children series that I definitely stand by. I love that book. I'm Supposed to Protect You from All This by Nadia Spiegelman. I read this in 2018 and I loved it. I loved it. I loved it so much. It talks a lot about maternal relationships and generational trauma, and I loved it. I feel like it's one I would go back and reread to see if I could stand by it today. If you don't know Nadia Spiegelman, relation to Art Spiegelman, who wrote the Mouse books, which are all about World War II and the Holocaust and all of those things. So I read this while I was also reading the Mouse books from Art Spiegelman. I was reading them all maybe for the same course, maybe it was separate courses, I don't remember, but in college. And I just felt so impacted by this memoir. I really, really loved it. Genuinely though, can't say if I would today. So it's going to have to go in the maybe bucket. Wires and Nerve, these are the spin-off graphic novel series related to the Lunar Chronicles, which I read at the beginning of 2021, and I really enjoyed them. And I gave number 1 and number 2 both 5 stars, I believe. But again, I'm gonna just have to say, I don't know, maybe. Behind Your Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. This is an interesting one. I read it in 2021 and I know I enjoyed it. I just don't know if I would give that book 5 stars or if the plot twist is just 5 stars, you know? I don't know. That's gonna have to go in the maybe bucket for me. Too Late by Colleen Hoover. We're gonna keep moving and act like I didn't read that and give it a 5 star. The Immortalist by Chloe Benjamin. That I read in 2019, which was a while ago, but I absolutely love that book. It's another one that's really character driven. It's really atmospheric and I remember the story, but I don't remember everything about it. I guess that's what's like holding me back from putting things in the I still stand by it bucket, because when I was reading these books, I feel like every year I'm learning more, you know, and I'm like growing as an individual and I'm trying to always be more inclusive and understand things to look out for that I didn't think about before, that I didn't know before. Like, I'm a growing person. I'm always trying to grow. And so what makes me nervous about putting things in the I still stand for it bucket is I don't want there to be something in there that is bad, but I just don't remember it because it was like a small thing or a small portion of the story that I don't remember from reading it 4 years ago. So I want to say Like, I love this book, but I would need to do another check of it. You know, I would need to read it again before knowing if that's something that I want to promote. So we're gonna put it in the maybe category. Mapping the Interior, Stephen Graham Jones. I stand by that. Excellent novella. The Other Wires and Nerve book, again, going in the maybe category. The Lying Game by Ruth Ware. There's gonna be a lot of Ruth Ware in here too, I think. And all of her books are also going to go in the maybe bucket for me. I genuinely don't know. I know I was loving her stuff back in 2017. As I keep reading more books from her, I like them less and less. So I'm really not sure. A House at the Bottom of the Lake, stand by it. Amazing. Definite 5-star for me. Not for everyone though. Josh Malerman in general, not for everyone. Kind of writes weird books. I really like them though. Watch Me Disappear by Janelle Brown. Absolutely loved it back in 2018. I've read from Janelle Brown more recently. I read Pretty Things. Is that what it's called? I'm actually not sure. But I've read 2 more books from her since reading Watch Me Disappear, and I really enjoyed those as well. But unfortunately, I don't really remember much about Watch Me Disappear beyond the basic plot of what happens. And so again, feel like it's gonna have to be a maybe for me. Same for An American Marriage. Remember loving that. Remember the plot, but don't know if I'd call it a favorite of mine today and if I would enjoy it as much in 2023 as I did in 2019. No Exit, Taylor Adams, read it in 2020, absolutely loved it. But here's another case of where something went wrong. I've always said I love this book. It's one of my favorite thrillers, and then I got one of my friends to read it and she's like, oh my god, the casual dropping of the N-word is so wild. And I'm like, well, what are you talking about? I don't think that was in the book when I read. Like, I have no memory of that at all. And so again, like, here are all these little things that I know if I read that today, I would be like, that's wild. Why is that happening? Why did I not think that if I was reading that in August 2020? I don't know. But again, learning, growing person. The story in itself, very thrilling. The concept of it, very thrilling. Very fun time. I still haven't revisited it since then, but I did read a new book from Taylor Adams, which was The Last Word. And I know I love that. Like 2023 me loved that, and I think that book was really fun, and it gave me the fun, thrilling experience that I remember having with No Exit. So I feel fine putting No Exit in like a maybe category and saying if you're gonna pick up something from Taylor Adams, start with The Last Word, because that was fun, and 2023 Ashley knows that she stands by that. I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness by Austin Channing Brown. I read this one when it was the Reese Witherspoon book club pick back in 2020, and I remember really enjoying it, but I don't know if I'd call it like a favorite book of all time for me in the favorite category. It was just really solid at doing what it was doing. So that one's also going in the maybe category for me. The Cabin at the End of the World is an interesting one to talk about because I did revisit this book. I originally read it in 2020 and then I read it again in 2023. And when I read it this year, it wasn't that 5-star feeling, you know? Like if I read that book for the first time now, it would be a 4-star for me, and I just know that in my brain. But I still love the story, and I still look at that as a 5-star I stand by. Like, I stand by the 5-star that I gave it in 2020, and I know it would be a 4-star if I read it for the first time today, but because I've just enjoyed it, I don't even know if that makes sense, I'm putting it in the I stand by it bucket. We've got to keep moving. We've got a lot of books to go through. We have a couple easy ones that I can just push through really quickly. We've got The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein, Foe, and In an Absent Dream, which I know I stand by all of those because I read those within the last couple of years. Love all of those for different reasons. Those are all great. Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. That is one I would have to revisit. Do not know, going in the maybe bucket. Same for My Sister the Serial Killer. I feel like that's kind of a book that if I read it again, I might not give it a 5 today, but I would still like it, but I don't know if I would like love it. So we're gonna put that in the middle bucket. Sheets by Brenna Thumler. I know I still love that as a graphic novel. We stand by that. Ask Again, yes. Not sure. Putting it in the maybe bucket. Red, White, and Royal Blue. I loved it when I read it. I don't know if I would today because I've read another book from Casey McQuiston now, the Subway one, One Last Stop. I read that one. Didn't love it as much as I remember loving Red, White, and Royal Blue. So I don't know if I'd love this one as much today. I Miss You When I Blink, essays by Mary Laura Philpott. Absolutely no idea. Don't remember much about it. Really like the cover of it. Don't remember much about the contents, so that's gonna go in the maybe bucket. The House in the Cerulean Sea and Migrations and even Lock Every Door and In the Dream House, I'm all going to put those in the stand by it bucket. The only one I would kind of hesitate on is Lock Every Door because I've also read more from Riley Sager and I don't know, but I feel fine standing by that. I feel fine recommending that thriller to people. I think it's a fun book. I think Riley Sager has a good mass appeal, so like if you're recommending a thriller to anyone, recommending a Riley Sager book is usually a safe option to go for. And then some of these other ones like Migration and In the Dream House, those are books that like bury me with those books. You know what I mean? Like those are amazing books. And then The House in the Cerulean Sea, also just a really good, heartwarming kind of story. Now that I'm saying this, I know there have been some conversations around that one as well that have come out since the publication of that book. I don't remember where those conversations ever landed, but I remember there being a lot of hubbub about it at one point and where TJ Klune got the idea of the story from. I don't think that ever went anywhere, but if anyone has any details about that, let me know down below. The next set, The Unhoneymooners and The Family Upstairs, those are going in the maybe bucket. Nothing to see here, stand by it, that's a great one. Delicates, stand by it, great graphic novel. Wild Game, My Mother, Her Lover, and Me is a memoir I read back in 2019. It made me cry, I liked it. I don't know if I would today. Going in the maybe bucket. The Heartstopper books, absolutely love. Heartstopper Volume 3, Heartstopper Volume 4. The next couple of books we're looking at, People We Meet on Vacation and Anxious People. Oh, and The Devil in the Dark Water. Ooh, and Una Out of Order. Okay, we've got a good run here. So all of these books, except for He Started It, I'm putting in the absolutely standby bucket. He Started It, I'm gonna put that in the maybe bucket. Then we've got a mix of some complicated ones. So we're gonna speed run through these as well. The Maidens, I don't know. Everybody hated that. I enjoyed it when I read it, but I don't know. Same exact concept for Rock, Paper, Scissors. Like, are those good thrillers? I don't know. I had fun with them when I read them. Don't know if I was reading more critically if I would. Don't know if it just caught me at the right time and I was reading it before I heard other people's thoughts. Do not know about those books. Luster, amazingly written. I feel like that's one of the best written books I've ever read. Don't know if I'd love it today, so wouldn't call that a favorite of all time. Wouldn't openly recommend it because I can't really remember things about it as much. So that's going in the maybe bucket. Also, I do acknowledge that some of the books I'm putting in the maybe bucket, I do recommend sometimes. Like Rock, Paper, Scissors. I know I recommend that when someone's like, I want an isolated thriller book. But I don't recommend it and say, this is the best book ever written. And so I feel like that's what distinguishes these categories for me. Just getting awful chatty. I am overcomplicating this for sure. All you really want to know is what my top tier is. So we're just gonna keep moving. The Death of Vivek Oji, going in the maybe bucket. The Dead in the Dark, I stand by that. The Vanishing Half, can't remember everything about it, but I would stand by it too. I remember that being an incredible book. Spy Family #2, I'm not going to talk about these individually. Some of them I rated 5 stars individually. I would say I stand by the manga as a whole. Are there some weird things in it? For sure. For sure, for sure. Can't remember which volume it starts happening in, but there's like a weird thing about a child having a crush on an adult at one point. There's a weird brother-sister relationship. I just try to move past those really quick. That's weird, for sure. But in general, otherwise, I think it's an enjoyable series. Transcendent Kingdom, I remember that being incredible writing, and I really like how it talked about science and religion. And if you're looking for a lit-fic book, I'd recommend picking it up, but I couldn't hold a great conversation with you about it because I read it in September of 2020. So I'd have to put it in the maybe bucket because it just doesn't make sense in my brain to go in the best overall. Pretty Things, same situation. It was good. It was great. I had fun, but I don't know if it's like an absolute favorite of all time. Same for What Big Teeth, except that's a really weird one and I know a lot of people don't like it, but I had a lot of fun with it. Spy Family we already talked about. The Shadows by Alex North. I still feel like that book was super cool. I remember really liking what it was doing, but I don't know if I read it today if I would, so that's going in the maybe bucket. Night of the Mannequins, love it. That one I stand by. Kind of hit or miss for people, but it was a hit for me, as was Fangs. Fangs is a little comic book that is so cute and so funny and just a wonderful time. And we have such a good run going because Watch Over Me by Nina LaCour, also amazing. I stand by that one. The Burning Girls by CJ Tudor, I stand by that one. The Venue by TJ Payne, I stand by that one. Is that a ridiculous book? Sure. It's not good literature, but it is entertaining. And then we have Every Value Break, which was a 5-star for me because it just like had me turning my head. I listened to that book all at once on audiobook, all in one sitting. I had fun with it. I have different feelings about Peter Swanson now, and I really feel like if I read this book now or reread it again, I wouldn't like it. I feel fine putting that in the I don't stand by it bucket instead of the maybe one. Like, sorry, don't know what happened here. It was a 5-star when I read it. Don't really know why. Can't really explain it, but wouldn't really consider it a 5-star anymore. Bathhouse, I feel like I'd have to reread it to feel like absolute certainty around it, but I do feel like pretty good around it. I feel like I almost need like a top tier and a bottom tier in the maybe category. Like I need the top tier in the maybes that I'm like, no, I know I like enjoyed these stories, but I would just need like to revisit it one more time. And then I need the bottom tier where I'm like, I'm genuinely not sure. Like I might not even really remember much about the book, and maybe that'll help this feel a little more distinct because I know there's a lot going in this category. Next we have The Girl from the Sea, which was a little graphic novel that is gonna go in the maybe top tier category. 8 Perfect Hours. I feel like I would stand by that. I really liked it. It was a really sweet little Christmas contemporary story to read, and I stand by it. The Island by Adrienne McKinty. I read this one in 2022. I thought it was really fun, really fast paced. I love a good survival thriller. And also 56 Days. Surprisingly, I stand by it. I had fun with this book. I know a lot of people hated it. I didn't. I thought it was fun. Your Guide to Not Getting Murdered in a Quaint English Village is a little comic book that I stand by. It's a good, fun little comic. Sundial by Katrina Ward, stand by it. We Spread by Ian Reid, stand by it. Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke by Erica LaRocca, stand by it. Unlikely Animals by Annie Hartnett, stand by it. The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston, stand by it. What a good run we just had. This is the best when they just all pile up like this. Amazing. Book lovers, that was like a soft 5. You know, it's not an aggressive 5, it's a soft 5. I feel like I liked it because I had already liked something from Emily Henry. If this was my first Emily Henry, it would not have been a 5. And so for that reason, I'm gonna put it in the top tier of the maybe middle category. Spy Family, we already addressed. Sign Here, I just read this one. And by the time you're seeing this video, I don't think you know this, but this was a 5-star for me. I love this book. I stand by this book. The Writing Retreat, stand by it, read it recently, loved it. The Housemaid by Freida McFadden. Since reading this book, I read it in September 2022. I loved it when I read it in September 2022. It's just a cheesy, ridiculous, fun time. Since reading it, I have learned about all of the conversation around Freida McFadden and how there are a lot of uncanny similarities to other popular thriller books with a couple of her books. I think Beth from Beth's All Booked is the first person I heard it from with Freida McFadden, with The Housemaid, and I don't even remember what the book is. Miss Parrish, The Last Mrs. Parrish. I haven't read The Last Mrs. Parrish, so I love this book, and it didn't like present any issue to me because I haven't read that book and I didn't know about it. I think if she's stealing stories intentionally, that's really weird, and I wish she wouldn't do that. And so because I know this now about Freida McFadden, like I feel weird putting her in the stand by it bucket just because there's some more figuring out that I should probably do of what she's doing, because if she's just like ripping off other books purposefully, that's not good. If there happens to be similarities, that's fine because that happens in books all the time. But I'm hearing there's like really specific things that are in common with the books, which is like weird. So I'm gonna put this in the maybe high tier category for now because I've still got some figuring out to do there. The Last Word by Taylor Adams, I mentioned earlier. I stand by it, read it recently, thought it was really fun. And then finally, the last book on the list, I didn't even realize we had made it here so quickly, is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton, which I would like to say I can fully stand by it, but I just don't know if 2023 me was encountering that text for the first time, if I would love it as much as I did when I read it in 2020. Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't, but it's a maybe. You know, it's got to go in the maybe bucket at the top tier of the maybes because I'm just not totally sure. Phew, so that is a wrap. I'm tired. I had to speed run through some of that. I didn't want this video to be like an hour long, but that was fun. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. There weren't nearly as many books in the I absolutely don't stand by it category as I thought there might be. And I think it's because of the way I organized my brain to have the maybe bucket. If you look at the bottom tier of the maybe bucket and the I absolutely don't stand by it, I guess that's more representative of about the number that I was expecting. And then there's still quite a bit in the maybe bucket that I'm just like, I would have to reread this to know if it's an all-time favorite. For most of those, I'm not planning on rereading them. For a lot of these books, I'm fine with just knowing I had a good time with it when I read it then, and if I don't need to worry about it for any reason, I'm not going to revisit it. If I was ever intending on like strongly recommending a book from this category and like advertising it as an all-time favorite, I would want to reread it before I did that, but that's not really my MO. I'm not that concerned about it. So these just kind of live in like, yeah, it's a 5-star on my Goodreads, but you know, maybe look for other opinions before you pick them up. Don't call those my all-time favorites because I don't know that they can stand as my all-time favorites. And then finally, the best bucket of all, the bucket of the books that I do still stand by for my 5 stars. I currently don't know how many books are in this because editing Ashley is going to have to figure that out, but I will put that number here and then we will see as a percentage of all the books I've ever read what percent is in this bucket, and out of the 123 5-star books that I had, what percentage of those do I still stand by today, and we'll see how I'm doing. That'll be an interesting thing for you to see right now and for me to figure out later. But yeah, these are the books that I would say if you're like looking to read some of my favorite books, if you found my channel recently and you're liking the books that I recommend and you're looking to see a more inclusive list of like my top favorites, these are my top favorite books. I feel good about these. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought of this video, if you were surprised by how many books I had in any category, or if you were surprised by any particular books that I put in a certain category. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye.